Hi guys. Hello. How's everyone doing? 7 o'clock, Tuesday evening. It's that time again. Getting started. Um, just waiting for people to get settled in and get my questions ready. How are you guys doing? How's everyone doing? I look a little just put my hair up today. Feeling just tired. One of those days. Been doing a lot. Had a busy 4 days. Just been traveling and doing a lot, and then just got back to being so busy and kids' duty. And my kids are exhausted today and cranky all dinner. So it's been one of those days. So just put my hair up and get ready to go because regardless of how tired I feel and how exhausted I am, I love coming on um, this show and coming on this live session that we do. I really do. I truly and honestly am very excited to come on. I have butterflies in my stomach, just excited to come on and really answer questions and help people, best I can. Um, and to know that even if one sentence or one section of this session that we do, if it's helping someone, then, I really, really hope that it helps because I know how it was. And I was so sick and could not find any resources like this for me. And so I am just so, so glad to be able to help others and be able to give back in this form. Jean Marie says, hello, hi, how are you? Where are you from? I'd love to know where people are signing in from. Um, Hopefully, you guys are, done with dinner and things and, getting ready to get settled in for the evening. So, yeah, like I said, my kids were super exhausted today for some reason, cranky and just tired, and I'm kind of tired, but very excited to get started with this session and get moving. So let's get started. I do always like to make the disclaimer that this is not medical advice. This is just for educational purposes. And this does not substitute for working with a practitioner or someone that you're already working with. This is just really more for educational purposes. And as I have mentioned before, I'm a physical therapist who's practiced the principles of functional medicine and have gotten certain certifications for the last 10 to 15 years, and then got very sick and thankfully was able to apply all those principles in my own healing, as well as working with some amazing practitioners that are dear friends of mine. I had luckily all the access and resources to be able to help me put my brain together with their brain together and help with my healing journey. And then I kind of promised myself that if I got much better, that I would finally apply for the functional medicine practitioner program, which I had kind of been dragging my feet on. And I did, and I got accepted through IFM, and I'm more than halfway through it, which is very exciting. So I like to make the disclaimer that I am not a practitioner and this is not medical advice. This is really for educational purposes, just to help you guys along in this very, very tough journey, and try to address things from a functional medicine perspective, especially since I can tell from the group there's a lot of sick people, and this is a really, really long and expensive journey. So I could do what little I can for play my part to help with this journey. Um, and so the other thing that I'm going to say is that we have grown, this group has grown leaps and bounds. And I really, really hope that, all the viewers that come on, the new viewers especially, that are just becoming part of the page, take some time to watch the previous live videos. Um, I'm not saying this just because I want you to watch it and have, any more views or anything like that. These are just Facebook Lives that I've done, but they're really done in a very specific way, chronological order. So if you go to the very, very first one, I believe it was March 29th. Um, and that was really the first one when I just told my whole story and really everything that I went through, my illnesses, the 10,000 diagnoses that I had, and explained everything of my journey and then what I did to get better. And so a lot of your questions will be answered by watching these lives. So if you haven't already done so, I've pinned them to the top of the group and they're in chronological order. The most recent one is usually, left and to the center, and then the older ones go all the way back. So scroll all the way to the right and watch, the oldest one and then the second one, which I believe was April 5th. And there I kind of continue my journey and then my healing and what I did to help myself heal. And then people are just asking amazing questions. So on each of the lives that I do, I basically answer all their questions from a very, functional medicine perspective. A lot of research and data and things that I've, looked up or put in there. So please, take a chance to watch all the other lives. It will really be beneficial for you. And then, of course, on Fridays, I usually put a little image with, reminding you of the Q&A that's live on Tuesday. And I typically try to take the questions until Monday night. So when I put that little image up on Friday, start putting your questions underneath there. And, until Monday evening, I try to take as many questions as I can so that I can answer them all on the live. I'm not fumbling when I'm talking to you and scrolling down and comments and things like that. It's just more of a fluid, and I have all the questions ready. And if I need to look up any data or anything, I have it all ready at the fingertips so that I can do a very informative and educational live Q&A session. So, those are just a few of the housekeeping items that hopefully you guys will take some time to watch the previous lives, and then start posting your questions on Friday when I put the image up, and that way your question will get answered. So let's get started. And I see a bunch of you have signed in, but let me get to the questions here. So the first question, David had actually put this last week when we were pretty much wrapping up the live Q&A last Tuesday, and he had asked about Dutch tests. And I had mentioned this kind of last week that, since I'm not a practitioner, I cannot interpret someone's Dutch test results for you. But I can explain to you kind of what it does. And Dutch, and if I can't remember the mnemonic correctly, what it stands for, is like dried urine test for cortisol and hormones and something like that, but it's the Dutch test is one of the most advanced hormone tests that is used to test sex hormones, adrenal hormones, especially the cortisol pattern, and then melatonin along with other metabolites to identify patterns of hormonal imbalance. I think it is the gold standard, in the industry, and it's really reliable and provides very, very accurate results. It is urine, so you do collect urine. They give you a card, and they give you, I think, 5 cards. And there's very set times of the day, like first thing in the morning, the moment you wake up, you have to get a sample, and then I think half an hour later, and then I forget the rest of the times. But I'm getting ready to do I think my 8th or 9th one next week. But basically, it's just collected by urine, and it is advised that do not drink any caffeine the day of, do not exercise, no steroids, anything like that, that'll really offset the adrenals or the cortisol pattern or anything like that. So that is advised the day and even the day before testing. So just to give you a real quick brief, because I know this is a very specific question to David, but the first page kind of has the little speedometer looking things, and it gives you your general estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and it's broken down, whether you're premenopausal levels, then, it's all the way to the left, and then, higher up you are postmenopausal is all the way to the left, and then premenopausal is above in the graph. And then it also has DHEA levels and cortisol pattern from morning to night. So it has this awakening response, where it really shows like when you first wake up what your cortisol is, and then 30 minutes later what your cortisol is, and then, kind of where it goes from there, how it tapers off, which is a normal awakening response. So it has kind of that, and then your DHEA is also listed. The second page will show estradiol, and it shows pre and postmenopausal ranges for your age range. And so it'll tell you that your estradiol is, at certain range. But if you're premenopausal, this is the average. If you're postmenopausal, this is what the range should be. And so it kind of breaks it down for you. And then it breaks down your estrogen and progesterone for your cycle. So if you are having a cycle, a woman who's having a cycle, it'll be follicular phase, and then it'll have ovulatory phase. And the follicular phase usually is like day 1 to day 7. And then, from then on is kind of like the ovulatory phase from day 14 onwards. So it kind of breaks it down what your estrogen should be in that level, your progesterone in those days, and things like that. So they kind of recommend that you should be testing, in your ovulatory phase is usually when they like it, like day 14 onwards, I think, or 17 onwards, things like that, anywhere from 14 to 17 days. Then page 3 breaks down the graphical representation of the reproduction hormones and the metabolites. So that's where, like, a pretty busy page, and it shows a lot of like breakdowns of the graph of kind of your estrogen and your estradiol, and what pathways, if it goes down the 16-OH, the 4-OH, or the 2-OH pathways, if it breaks down. And it shows the metabolism of estrogen in different phases, and then the methylation and breakdown. Like, how well are you breaking down this estrogen that your body is producing? Is it in a good zone? Is it in the bad zone that you don't want it in? Things like that. So it really shows you if you are breaking down that estrogen that your body is producing. It talks about like the 2-OH, the 4-OH, the 16-OH, and of course 2-OH is the safest of all the pathways. And then it kind of describes them, accordingly, which pathways need help and which one should be higher. It kind of shows you a little pie chart and things like that. And then page 4 shows DHEA levels, testosterone levels. And since these go down with age, especially after 30, you want to compare your age-related levels and see where you are. And then lastly, it'll check some B12, B6 markers, glutathione. It's very good about showing your glutathione, and if your body's producing glutathione, which, as you know, is a master detoxifier in your body needs glutathione. It'll show melatonin levels if you are producing some. So those are really good markers, so it's a very comprehensive test as far as your sex hormones, as far as your adrenal hormones, cortisol patterns, testosterone, and then just what pathways. It really helps your practitioner identify, if you're, where are your metabolites? If you're breaking down the estrogen, is it not getting broken down? Should they supplement, with things like DIM or sulforaphane? If you're not producing enough glutathione, especially if you're a mold patient, then maybe you need to supplement with glutathione, to help. And so it really just gives you a very good snapshot of all of these hormones. So I hope that helps, David, just give you a basic idea. But like I said, it is considered a gold standard. I also do like the ZRT salivary test too. But this one is definitely a lot more detailed and a lot more accurate. Mari asked about her husband, who is a type 2 diabetic. I know she put a bunch of stuff, and just mind you guys, like, I get a lot of long questions, so I really just paraphrase them to really, for the purpose of answering these questions. But Mari asked about her husband, who is a type 2 diabetic. He's been chronically overweight, asthmatic, and symptoms reappear when he gets a chest cold, looking for something to help his lungs. So Mari, I think this is the first time you've asked a question here. And if you heard my disclaimer in the beginning, I am not a practitioner, so I cannot give medical advice, especially not knowing his entire medical picture, and his condition and his tests and his results and things like that. But I will give you some generic things that I feel like when you're telling me things about someone being chronically overweight, asthmatic, and he has breathing issues. So one of the things that sticks out for me is, especially someone who's a type 2 diabetic and is chronically overweight, they really have insulin resistance. Most of those patients have pretty high numbers for their insulin, their fasting insulin. And so one of the key things, and I think I have talked about this in some of the previous sessions, but balancing insulin resistance or increasing your insulin sensitivity is one of the key things in healing, especially for someone who's a type 2 diabetic, he's chronically overweight, he's asthmatic, so he's having some breathing issues. You really, really need to work on bringing down the insulin resistance. And so what is insulin resistance? So I've mentioned this before, but in one of the lives, but when you go to the doctor's office and they check your fasting glucose and they're like, your results come back and your fasting glucose is 90. And they're like, oh, this is excellent. You have a great fasting glucose. The problem is you and I both go in and we both get our fasting glucose done, and yours is 90. It shows your glucose is 90 in the morning when you took your blood work without eating, and mine is 90. What it doesn't show you is how much insulin is being produced to keep your sugar levels at 90 and my sugar levels at 90. So maybe you are only producing, 6 units of insulin to keep you at 90. However, I could be producing 25 units of insulin to keep me at 90. So over time, my body has to keep producing more and more and more insulin to keep me at that level of 90. And I know there's a study out there that was done that said that, most people, their body will maintain a steady or a normal glucose level for anywhere from 10 to 13 years before it starts presenting as diabetes. Now, I know in this case, Mara's husband is already diagnosed with diabetes, but that's the shocking part. The physicians and the practitioners are not doing a fasting insulin, which is a very, very big indicator of disease process. And so, what you want to do is work on bringing that fasting insulin down. And really increasing your insulin sensitivity. So someone who only needs 6 units is very insulin sensitive, but someone, if they like, if someone like me, which I don't, but if I did and I'm producing 25 units, then that's pretty insulin resistant. So next time you're at the doctor's office, really ask about testing the fasting insulin, which is a major indicator. And insulin resistance is the cause of 8 of the most common diseases today. In fact, they are calling Alzheimer's type 3 diabetes. That is the new name that they are now finding, or data has shown and studies have shown about Alzheimer's now being the type 3 diabetes because it's caused by insulin resistance. And when you have so much insulin resistance, then you have so much inflammation. And that inflammatory process then is affecting your lungs and it's affecting your breathing, and it's you're affecting your weight, and obviously you have diabetes. And so for these patients, you really need to work with a nutritionist to really help bring those, especially a functional medicine nutritionist who will really work on bringing your fasting insulin down, your insulin levels down, and so that you need to produce less and less. So if you have insulin resistance, like I said, it's the cause of 8 of the most common diseases today, including cardiovascular disease and high blood pressure, cholesterol, Alzheimer's, polycystic ovarian syndrome, diabetes. I mean, they are finding this elevated insulin to be the cause of most of these, common diseases out there. And so it's very, very important to bring that insulin down. Um, and of course, it's all with diet and exercise, and every meal having high protein, high fat, very low carb, and healthy carbs at that too, to really bring these levels down. um, and so that's really something that sticks out at me. I don't know if Mara, your husband, wears a CGM, which is a continuous glucose monitor. Those are very, very readily available now. Insurance pays for it. I wear one. I've been wearing one for the last year and a half. I'm not a diabetic, but I wear it more for biohacking reasons, and really to just keep track of my blood sugars and my glucose and what kind of foods spike me and things like that. Or, it's really, I think, beneficial for some adrenal fatigue patients as well, because it shows, like in my case, if I dip too low, then it goes in the red zones and it tells me that my blood sugar is too low, which in that case, then your adrenals kick in and they produce a lot of cortisol too. So talk to your provider about a continuous glucose monitor, and that way you're not constantly pricking yourself, but you really are working when the one I have is, it's an app in my phone that you can really just monitor your levels and try to keep your fasting, your not your fasting, but your regular glucose at a very steady line, and so that in turn will bring your insulin numbers down. The other thing I can think of too is that at the peak of my illness, when my insulin resistance was potentially through the roof. At that time, we were not measuring, but I had shortness of breath, quite a bit, just with one flight of stairs. It's a very inflammatory process. When you have so much insulin being produced, it's very inflammatory. And so for me, like I used to do a lot of nebulizing treatments, and I used to nebulize silver and then hydrogen peroxide and some iodine, not together, all separately. And there's very specific amounts that you can talk to your practitioner if you're working with someone. The nebulizing helped a lot just to calm down the shortness of breath, and sometimes that I would just get really out of breath just going up one flight of stairs, and so that was really helpful for me as well. Um, and then saunas helped a lot. I'm going to talk a lot about saunas today because there's been multiple questions about sauna. So that helped me a lot, especially with just decreasing inflammation in my body, and then at the time just to really help with some of the shortness of breath and things like that. So nebulizer, decrease inflammation. The sauna, quercetin is actually really good for patients with lung issues. Um, I can't. I think that when we learned in our functional medicine program, I think they set up to 1,000 milligrams of quercetin per day. You'd have to work with your practitioner, but that's just something that I did to really help with the inflammatory process, help with my lungs, help with the breathing. Quercetin is really good for asthma and allergies and things like that. So that's something that really worked well for me. And I have my kids on quercetin too right now because they all have some kind of seasonal allergies, especially my oldest is having it more this year. My younger two are actually doing very well, and they haven't needed anything. So they actually are on quercetin as well right now. So, Mari, I hope that answers your question. Again, I can't give you very, very detailed advice because I am not his practitioner and I don't know the whole medical picture. But just based on what you've been telling me, for me, I think the most important critical factor for you, and you can Google this, you can talk to your practitioner, you can start working with a functional medicine nutritionist, is to really balance and decrease your insulin resistance. I think you will get the most bang for your buck for a lot of those conditions that he has going on. Um, Sue had asked about another. She had put a long bunch of stuff, and she's having major sleep issues, and she's napping in the afternoon in 3 hours, and then gets a burst of energy. She crashes at 3:30 p.m., takes a nap for 3 hours, then gets a surge of energy around 9 a.m., and then she's up till 1 a.m. But if she doesn't nap, then she's up till 4 a.m. I mean, she's just put this whole sleep pattern there. Um, So, and if she did not take a nap at 3:30, then she's totally exhausted. She's up till 4 or 5 in the morning. Um, if she falls asleep before midnight, she wakes up by 2 to 3 a.m. I'll tell you something, Sue. I mean, just from listening to all of these patterns there, you definitely sound like you may have some adrenal issues because this is something that sounded like my patterns. When I was very ill, I would not be able to make it through the evening. I was exhausted. I'm literally after 6 p.m. dinner and I'm in bed. I mean, I just couldn't function with my kids at all. I couldn't do anything. Um, and then I would wake up, I would sleep, and then I'd wake up by 1 o'clock, and I'd be up till 4 a.m. And so it really sounds like you've got some adrenal issues going on. I'm not sure, Sue, if you have worked with a practitioner to do your cortisol testing, like the cortisol awakening response. You can do the saliva one if it's just cortisol. They do a 4-point cortisol test, I believe that's what it's called. Um, and really see where your patterns are. Like, are you hypo, which is less? Are you hyper, which is producing a lot? Like, first we need to find out what pattern you're in. There was a year and a half, like we went through a lot of stressful time in our lives, and I was hyper. For that year or year and a half, I mean, my adrenals were so stressed out, and they were producing so much cortisol that it was hyper. And then as soon as everything ended, I just kind of crashed. And at that point, it was like flatline. My adrenals were barely producing any cortisol. I had, was pretty much in stage 4 adrenal fatigue or adrenal failure or whatever you want to call it. And so I was completely hypo at that point. And so you really want to make sure that you have done a 4-point cortisol test, first of all, to identify where you are at. And that's really going to help you then decide, and your practitioner can help you decide which supplements and adaptogens and things to take based on that. Because if you are hyper and then they give you some of the more stimulating ones, like I think like rhodiola and things like that, it's going to make you even more hyper and it's going to exhaust your adrenals. Um, and so you really want to be sure that you know where you are. Some people do well by just taking plain ashwagandha, like no adaptogens, no other adaptogens, rhodiola or licorice or anything like that, just plain ashwagandha. And that really helps balance and modulate your cortisol response. It's called an adaptogenic because it adapts to your cortisol response. And so ashwagandha, if you're really high, then it adapts to you being really high. If you're really low in cortisol, then it adapts to that. And so ashwagandha is supposed to help your adrenals heal. The one thing I will tell you, Sue, for me, that worked amazing and it worked like a charm. Like it was the first thing. I think I put on the group too so many posts about the importance of sleep, and I've mentioned it in comments. I've talked about it in the lives. Sleep is absolutely critical, especially when you're someone with chronic illness and you're trying to heal. So the first thing that needs to be balanced out is your sleep. And so for me, nothing worked. Melatonin would give me terrible headaches, did not tolerate any of the sleep supplements. And in general, I'm a very holistic, natural person. So I really didn't want to take much at all. And I started taking phosphoserine. I think it's PHOSPHOSERRINE, phosphoserine. And it is amazing. So I take it only at nighttime. And so what the phosphoserine does is that when I have that cortisol surge, or when I did have that cortisol surge at night, it just it dampened that response. And so instead of waking up at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., like just wired and not being able to sleep, I started sleeping through the night. So it's something that I still take this till this day, and it's, pretty natural. It just really helps dampen the cortisol response. And so that really is something that I would suggest that you talk to your practitioner about, is to start some phosphoserine at night. It is wonderful. And from what the practitioners say, you can even get up in the middle of the night if you can't sleep at 1 o'clock. You take it again. It's not drowsy or groggy or anything like that, and you'll still be able to wake up in the morning. And so that I think would be a first step for you, Sue, is to really start sleeping better through the night. Um, Once you start sleeping better through the night, you won't be as exhausted throughout the day, but also you won't have these crazy cortisol surges and drops because your adrenals are starting to heal. So, if you guys saw earlier this week, I put one of those images about the adrenals. They heal only between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So you really need to be sleeping at that time. And so I'm not big on sleeping pills and things like that. It's just stuff that I've never taken. I would really rather do natural things. And so phosphoserine at bedtime, when I do that, I just sleep all night and I go to bed early. By 9:30, I'm in bed. 10 o'clock, I'm out. And then I just sleep through the night. So it's just something that has really helped regulate my cortisol levels, especially since I started the LDN. It really LDN for some reason increases my cortisol levels at night, and it was waking me up. And if you guys have watched all the other lives, you'll see that this is one of the reasons I stopped the LDN, and that was a big mistake. And so yeah, so I just talk to your practitioner about phosphoserine is probably the first step, for you to start just sleeping at night, and then really working on your stress patterns throughout the day. Like, what else are you doing? Yoga, meditation. What are you doing for stress relief? Are you doing any vagus nerve stimulation? Are you doing any humming, painting, singing, anything that will really bring your stress levels down during the day? Going for a walk, forest bathing, just very, restorative and healing. Forest bathing in nature, meditation in the forest, or walking in nature and meditating. And those are really other natural things that you can do to start really calming down the adrenals from having these crazy up and down surges, because it just sounds like your adrenals are overtaxed and overworked right now, and they're having a very tough time. But the bigger thing, like I said, I would really talk to your practitioner about phosphoserine and starting to incorporate that at bedtime. And so you're really preventing surges at bedtime. And so then you're starting to sleep better. I've mentioned this before. The other thing I do is Vibrant Blue Oils, which is by Jodie Cohen. I think she's fantastic and she's just a brilliant person. She has an essential oil that I apply it on the tip of my earlobes, and it's called Circadian Rhythm. It's just a natural essential oil that I apply to the tip of my earlobe. And I have shown data before on the page where I have compared the nights that I don't apply that, and I probably have maybe anywhere from 5 to 35 minutes of deep sleep. But on the nights that I applied, like I was traveling for 4 days and I didn't have it with me, and I slept good, but I didn't have the deep sleep. My REM sleep was pretty good, and then once I came home last night and I applied it behind my ear, I have an hour and a half of deep sleep last night. It's just very restorative, very natural. So for me, I'd rather use a lot of these natural things than go to these, very strong prescription pills and things like that. But really need probably for you to start working on a lot of stress relief patterns. No phones before 2 hours before bed. I always meditate before I go to sleep. I listen to a live, meditation session, which is chanting, or even just something that's more audio or guided or anything like that. And then I have, it's called Nuvana, Neuvanna. It's called Nuvana, and it's little headphones that go in your ear, and they produce a little uh, pulse that helps to stimulate your vagus nerve. And so I do that to help me with sleep, to help me relax, especially if I've had a long day like today. And I take phosphoserine before bed, and then I'll apply the essential oils behind my ear. And I've been sleeping amazing for the last few, 8, 10 months, year, or whatever. And so that's really been a great game changer for me. So try all of these things. You can even on YouTube, they have like EFT tapping where you can tap your vagus nerve, and there's a specific pattern that you have to do. So you can look into that. You can meditate every night before sleep. I'll tell you, the nights that I meditate before sleep, or even if I wake up in the middle of the night, my phone is off, but in the middle of the night, if I wake up and my phone is there and my headset is right there so I don't disturb my husband, I put that on and I just meditate at 1 a.m. And I have a folder of meditation that's saved in my YouTube, and I just meditate, and I kid you not, after that I go into this deep sleep, even deeper than when I first slept in. So highly recommend. People have these more easier natural ways to try and put themselves to sleep and to stay asleep, because that is going to be critical in your healing journey, absolutely critical to work in your healing journey. Hope that helps, Sue. I know it's a long-winded answer. Um, Sawara asked, what are the earbuds called? It's called Nuvana, Neuvanna. Nuvana. It's a vagus nerve stimulation technique. It's a little unit like this, and it stimulates your vagus nerve. And so I have that plugged in my ears, and you have to connect it through Bluetooth through your phone. And then I play the meditation, whatever meditation I'm using for that night, through there. And then you can adjust on the Nuvana app the frequency, how much you want it, how high or how low. And I do a 15 to 20 minute session every night before I go to sleep. And it's just so helpful. It helps me sleep very, very well. Amy had asked about a few supplements. You had put a bunch of questions there about tart juice. You had started that. You had started moringa. You had started SAMe, I think you said, CBD, LDN. But then you also said you are on GABA and Celebrex, and you wanted some advice about supplements. Same thing. I'll tell you, I don't know your entire medical picture and your entire medical condition to be telling you exactly what supplements to take and not take. But I will say this, Amy, and I know I've said this to you before. I still feel the same way. I feel like, sometimes introducing too many things at one time is really difficult, not only in your body, especially people who are very chronically ill have a lot of sensitivities, and we have a lot of histamine type reactions, mast cell, and your body's just not detoxing well. So it's very, very difficult for your body to handle all these supplements just being thrown at it at one time. And then the other thing is you don't even know which one's making you feel ill and which one's making you feel better. So I really, really recommend, one thing at a time. I know it's been a few weeks since you've started LDN and you seem to have adjusted better with that, just reading some of the posts on the page, which is very exciting. And so based on that, I really would address your major issues at this point and really just introduce another supplement at a time. I think the golden standard is at least 3 to 4 weeks on a new supplement to really see if you're having any adverse reactions, how it's helping you before you start throwing more supplements at it. You want to give your body the optimal healing conditions to heal itself so that you don't have to take so many supplements. And you need the least amount of supplements to heal. So, I'm really glad that you're tolerating LDN better. But as far as all those supplements are concerned, I did take moringa when I was very sick. I think I took the one that had moringa and wheatgrass and chlorophyll, but at that time I was very, very sick and I was not detoxing. And you have to really make sure that your phase two detoxification channels are open, versus just taking all these supplements and then not being able to detox. So at the time when I was so sick, I was in the midst of liver flushes. I was doing one a month. I did 7 of them back to back, to really help my liver detox. And then at the same time, I was doing saunas every day and ozone, and really making sure that if I'm taking these supplements, then my body's able to excrete and take all that stuff out. But having said that, like I said, I've taken moringa and the tart juice. So actually, when I was really, really sick, and I think that this actually helped me quite a bit to get better, was inflammatory kind of concoction I used to make. And it's just an old ancient remedy that has been used for a lot of years. But basically, it's tart cherries. I would buy the organic frozen tart cherries. So tart cherries, organic turmeric, organic ginger. So I would buy the roots of those, and then organic mint. And I would put all of those things, all 4 of them, in my juicer, and I would make a bottle of this juice. So organic tarts, cherries, like frozen cherries, organic turmeric root, organic ginger root, and organic mint, fresh leaves. And just blend all of it in the juicer and really make this very concentrated juice out of it. And I would put it in the refrigerator, but I would have it first thing in the morning, like one big shot. And I think it really helped me. This is a recipe that's been used and apparently shown for inflammatory results, helping with inflammation in your body. So for me, that was really helpful. And going back to my earlier point when I answered the question for Sue, I am really just more of a believer in healing my body naturally instead of just throwing so many supplements at it. I mean, don't get me wrong, there was a time I was very sick. I was on a lot of supplements, but I was being monitored, by some practitioners and myself, and just keeping track of everything I was on. But for me, like, these natural things work a lot better. And I just think that they have just a better effect on the body. The only thing with them is that you have to be very, very consistent with this, um, natural supplements or plant based or anything that you use. So I think I did that, the cherry, turmeric, ginger, and mint concoction of juicing for a good 3 to 4 months. And I just did it every single day, 7 days in the morning. I would make enough in a bottle that would probably last me 2 or 3 days, because you want to, you want it fresh. You can't just, after 24 to 48 hours, you don't want to use it too much. And so I would make this mix and I would just drink it every day. And I think it was really, really helpful when it came to my inflammation. And so that helped me a lot. So, Amy, hope that answers your question. And again, I just, I'm a big proponent of just one supplement at a time, to really not throw your body off balance and really just confuse your body. And then I just had massive amounts of sensitivities and intolerances. And so I didn't know what was coming from where. It's very typical for people to, especially practitioners, to just throw all these supplements at you when they first start out with you because you're very sick, and yes, you need all of them, but it's so difficult when you are just not doing so well. Deb asked, could you post the herbs, oils that you use at night? Yes. I'll post it here real quick just so you have it and I don't forget. But it's Vibrant Blue Oils by Jody Cohen. She's amazing. I read her book cover to cover, I think, in a whole night just because I was so impressed with the information. And the one I use at night is called Circadian Rhythm. So there's that. So Wanda asked, and she said, I am so tired and I'm in so much pain. I think she put a little bit more information in that, but basically the gist of it is that she's very sick, she's very tired, she's in a lot of pain. It sounds, Wanda, to me, and this is how I was, very sick, very tired, brain fog, could barely empty a dishwasher, could barely go up a flight of stairs. I mean, I was this young 41-year-old female who had to like hold on to the side of the railing to go up a flight of stairs, and I was just in so much pain. I was exhausted, and my body was just very, very inflamed at that time. I had typical inflammatory symptoms. I think that sounds like you are in a state of inflammation. You have to figure out where that inflammation is coming from. Again, not knowing your entire medical picture, I cannot give, any medical advice anyways, but it just, how is your diet? Like, are you on an anti-inflammatory diet? Are you on an elimination diet? Have you taken out gluten and dairy? At my sickest, I never had celiac. I got tested twice. And my doctors even said, my conventional medicine doctor said that it won't help me to take out gluten. But I did. And it actually really, really helped me. And it's been, so many years now that I have not had gluten again. So, what is your diet? Are you on an anti inflammatory diet? Are you on an elimination diet? I stopped gluten, I stopped dairy. There was a year that I was gluten free, vegan. It was very tough, but because I'm already vegetarian, so it's very, very hard. There's not too many sources for me, but I was gluten free, I was vegan, and it really helped to calm down the inflammation and all the aches and pains. My hands would be swollen, my face would hurt, my body would hurt. Do you have leaky gut? Have you been tested for leaky gut? I mean, that's just one of the first places to start. Like, when in doubt, treat the gut. Sometimes you just have these, food sensitivities and allergies and things like that because of a leaky gut. So, has your gut been tested? What is your stress levels like? Are you under high levels of stress? What are you doing about the stress? It also sounds like your adrenals are very taxed, and kind of what I talked earlier on with Sue. If you missed it, just listen earlier on today. I talked quite a bit about adrenals and adrenal fatigue, and how to treat your adrenals, and doing a 4-point cortisol adrenal test or 4-point cortisol test, doing that to find out what level, if you are in adrenal fatigue, because again, all of those symptoms sound very, very similar. Have your sex hormones been checked? Estrogen, progesterone, testosterone. I know I've mentioned this before, but people don't realize this. Like, sex hormones have 20 to 30 other functions in the body other than just reproduction. People don't realize that, that you don't need your sex hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, just for reproduction. You actually need it for a lot more other functions. And I know my hormones were completely out of whack when I was so sick, and really in a state of inflammation. And once the hormone levels started balancing out, I didn't have energy to start working out or any of that again, but it definitely started feeling better. I wasn't like this crazy woman and brain on fire type symptoms and that kind of stuff. So have you had your hormone levels checked? Have you had, leaky gut checked? That's the first place to start. Anti-inflammatory diet, of course, like I said, and then cutting out caffeine. I know this sounds really crazy, but especially for someone who's so sick, or like, Sue earlier on was talking about all her adrenal issues. I mean, that would be a first start, because the thing with caffeine is that it like hyperstimulates your overly taxed adrenals. They're already tired, they're already exhausted. So how much caffeine are you drinking? And I had to stop completely. I was only drinking maybe half or three-quarters of a cup of coffee every morning, and that's really all I was having, and I had to completely stop that. So how much caffeine are you having? And then the other thing is, are you taking iron? Like, what are your blood levels for iron? Have you been tested for your B12, your vitamin D? Have your levels been tested? Sometimes really high iron or ferritins can be a problem. Ferritin levels can be a problem for patients being very sick. Really low levels of vitamin D can make you really sick. So have your blood levels been tested? Have your B12 levels been tested? Are you low? Sometimes if you're really low, then that can be a problem. And are you supplementing? If you're supplementing B12, are you supplementing with the correct type of B12, which is the methylated form? Just because people who have MTHFR or they have methylation issues cannot take regular B12, they have to take the methylated form. And so if you are taking a different kind, are you absorbing it? And then sometimes the B12 levels are too high. It's a little rare, but it's, too high. So really, I mean, there's just a host of issues that could be going on. You just would really need to be assessed and checked as a whole as far as your gut and your inflammatory issues, your diet, your toxin levels, your cortisol test, check your adrenals, checking your blood levels for B12 and D, and a lot of the CRP and the basic blood markers, inflammatory markers. How is your liver enzymes? I mean, there's just so much. And then, is anybody monitoring your blood levels and your magnesium? Is that being tested? Basic metabolic panels, CRP, sed rate. So there's so many things that go into play. And I know it's overwhelming, especially if it's very expensive for you to work with a practitioner. And that's where I say that really some of the most natural, easy things to do are diet, these supplements, or these natural things like what I talked about earlier on, the tart cherry and the ginger and the turmeric and the mint juice, things like that. But I think, for you, if you have nowhere else to start, right off the bat, I would start your elimination diet and take off gluten and take off dairy, from your diet, cut out coffee, and like seriously cut it out. Like look through the packages and make sure you're not getting hidden forms of gluten. Like sometimes when I look at veggie burgers in the back, it'll say wheat gluten. They use it as a binder, and so no, then I wouldn't be gluten free if I was eating veggie burgers or things like that. So you have to be very careful to truly eliminate gluten and dairy for about 3 months and see how you feel, and take out coffee and things like that, and then see how you do with that. So hope that helps. Mona asked, what is the best time to take pre and probiotics? That is a great question, Mona. People have different schools of thought when it comes to this, but at least my go-to has always been taking probiotics first thing in the morning on an empty stomach. I think that's the best way for the probiotics to really, make it into your stomach lining and gut and all that. And so probiotics, the best time is usually first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, at least 20 minutes before you eat anything. And some people take probiotics late at night. So if you eat dinner around 6 o'clock and then your stomach is emptied out by 9 p.m., before you go to bed, you can take probiotics as well. And that's okay too. I don't like to take a lot of supplements at bedtime just because I used to be very sensitive. So I like to sleep without any issues with my stomach. So I know people who take multivitamins at night. I just take all that stuff in the morning. So for me, my nighttime is really just very basic, just so I can sleep well. So you can take it morning or night, but you really just have to make sure that you have an empty stomach. And then prebiotics, you can take it anytime. I mean, it's really just prebiotics is actually food for the good bacteria. So ideally, yeah, if you take prebiotics before a meal or before eating, that's great. But you're just providing food for the good bacteria. I mean, I just had dinner and I had a whole bunch of jicama for dinner just because I love jicama, and it's a prebiotic and it's excellent for you, for the good bacteria. So prebiotics, I think you can really take any time of the day, but probiotics should really be taken on an empty stomach, ideally first thing in the morning. Okay, we have a couple more questions. I don't want to run out of time. Georgie asked about saunas and how they helped with chronic illness. How long do you have to do them? Georgie said, I have adrenal fatigue and SIBO and I feel like an 80-year-old every day. I did the sauna the other day and I felt incredible, thinking about doing it twice a week due to all the external pollutants. Georgie, I will tell you that when I was very, very sick, and even till this day, I still do the sauna quite a bit. I absolutely love the sauna. The sauna, it especially if it's an infrared sauna, it activates heat shock proteins, and it helps kind of kill out and take out all the dead proteins, and helps then to grow and regenerate new protein and mitochondria. And so I really like that, the autophagy that you get with saunas. It boosts your immune system, it decreases inflammation, it increases your circulation, and it detoxes your body and the major organs. Um, and so for me, at my peak of my illness, when I couldn't do anything else, all I could do was a sauna. I would do a sauna. I have a blanket at home. I mentioned it last time. It's called Higher Dose, Higher Dose, DOSE. That's the one I use, and I've used it for years now. I have the same blanket that I've used for years. And so I would do the infrared sauna blanket for about 25 minutes, and then I would get in a cold shower and just do an ice cold shower or a ice cold plunge in the bathtub. And so that was the only thing that I could do when I was very, very sick. And it helped me a lot because I would do the infrared sauna. It would get me sweating and increase circulation and cause vasodilation of the arteries and things like that, and really help with detoxifying. And then I would get into an ice cold bathtub or ice cold, shower. And what that would do would constrict all my blood vessels, and so that vasodilation, vasoconstriction would help push all that fluid out of there, helping with my inflammation. When I did the hot and then the cold, it would really help me with my um, uh, pain in my muscles and my joints. That was something that it really, really helped with. And I just did so good on that. I couldn't walk, I couldn't go down my driveway, I couldn't do anything, but at least I couldn't exercise at all. But at least the heat on the sauna and then the cold is something that I could really do and tolerate well. So I really am a big fan. The only thing is that you have to really start out slow. When I first started, I think I could barely tolerate 5 minutes or 10 minutes of that blanket. It was at the lowest setting, and I was so sick that I could, like it just hurt to do that. And so you really have to start out very, very slow and then build your tolerance as you work your way up from that. So 5 minutes or maybe 10 minutes, and then slowly, every week increase by a minute or two. And then, there's a dial and different settings on the higher dose that I could increase the temperature to. Um, and so now, once I got better and I was doing 30 minutes, I was tolerating it pretty well. But you have to stay very, very hydrated. And I'm going to piggyback Kelly's question where she asked the opposite about not being able to tolerate saunas at all and feels horrible for days after, and she gets horrible headaches. And so, Kelly, I will tell you that that sounds like to me like you're very dehydrated before you even go into the sauna. You have to stay very, very hydrated before you use the sauna, because what it's doing is it's actually taking out a lot of these toxins, and it takes it out in the form of sweat. But with sweat comes out all your electrolytes and your sodium and potassium, and just electrolytes are being lost. So you really, really have to drink a lot of fluid. So just to give you an idea, I haven't used the sauna in about 2 to 3 weeks because we've been traveling, and I've just had a very busy few days and few weeks, and haven't used the sauna in a very long time, in like at least 2 to 3 weeks, maybe more, but definitely 2 to 3 weeks. So today I decided that, I was finally going to get back on track and get back on routine and go back to doing the sauna. And so in the morning, I had my EAAs, essential amino acids, and I had that with some electrolytes, like an electrolyte powder. And I drank the whole thing, and then I went to work out, and then I went into the sauna, and within 10 minutes, I felt completely dehydrated. I mean, I did the sauna today in the gym, and I can easily tolerate 15 minutes. I think within 10 minutes, I was done. And I had to get out. And then, of course, I do a very, very ice cold shower right in the gym, right there. And so that really helps. But I've pretty much had a headache since most of the afternoon. because again, even though I had made it a point that I was very hydrated before and I took electrolytes in the morning and I've stayed hydrated throughout the day, it was just a little much for my system. So it gave me a headache. So that's pretty normal that you're feeling that, but you have to take all the steps to ensure that doesn't happen. Now, if I continue this pattern and I, get accustomed again and start using it again, regularly, then I won't have these headaches again. But today, like I said, I hadn't been back in so long in that sauna, so that was definitely tougher for me to manage today. And you don't want to do it too long. I mean, some people think more the better, which is actually not true. You're going to feel like crap if you really are just in there for too long. So, someone like Kelly, I would just start with 5 minutes. That's all you need. That's all you can tolerate without having any side effects. But you start with 5 minutes a day, and then you work your way up slowly to 6 minutes after a week, and then 7 minutes. You don't have to do 10 to 15 minutes. There's people that sit in that sauna. There's a guy sitting in there today. He was probably in there for 30 minutes. I have no idea how he can even tolerate that, let alone not get out with an excruciating headache. And then I think when I left the gym, I am pretty sure I saw him walking down, walking home, and it was like 75 degrees already. So, kudos to him. I mean, I can't do that, and that's definitely something that would be pretty detrimental for someone who's got a chronic illness. But yeah, so start off with 5 minutes, Kelly, and just do that and make sure that, and I'm talking a gallon of water. Like you need to have a gallon of water the entire day, especially in the days that you're doing saunas, and then use some sort of electrolytes or electrolyte drops or anything, in your water to just get you accustomed. And sometimes, if your adrenals are an issue, if you are Kelly have adrenal issues, you're not well, you have adrenal fatigue, or you have hormonal imbalance, then you're going to have a tough time handling heat. I really had a tough time handling heat in the beginning, and I am a Florida girl, like I love my heat. And I would just tell my husband, I couldn't even sit in the sun for 5 minutes without getting extremely sick, nauseous and headaches, and I would just feel horrible. So I think at that time, though, my hormones were very imbalanced, my adrenals were completely tanked, and so you really need to make sure of that too. But I have had a lot of success, and I know people who've had a lot of success who've done the sauna, started out very, very slow, and then did a cold shower immediately afterwards. And in the beginning, it's a little tough to tolerate because you've got this, you heat it up, you're sweating, and then you instantly go to this cold shower. But it's got immense benefits. The hormesis benefit of it, of really just helping your body go into this homeostasis um, state, and the hormesis, which is a gentle or mild stress to your body, which promotes healing and things like that. So I would try that, Kelly. Hydrate yourself like crazy before and after. Take some electrolytes, and then don't stay in there too long. Just 5 minutes. Start out slow, and take a cold shower afterwards. And if all else fails, then you probably should have worked with a practitioner to really check your adrenals and check your hormone levels and thyroids and things like that. So, hope that helps, guys. I gave you guys some very, very detailed answers. I hope that was, yeah. So, Julie asked, what if due to your illness you have heat intolerance? Absolutely. Cryo. I did cryotherapy. I mean, and I love the sun. I love heat. I'm a Florida girl that loves heat. And I could not even sit in the sun for 5 minutes. So, yeah, cryotherapy was awesome. I did magnesium. The place that I used to go to had magnesium um, baths, or like you can do the magnesium dips in there for, you know, 45 minutes, which was very helpful. And then they also had cryotherapy chambers, which I did that. It's really, really good for inflammation. So, yes, you can get a lot of these benefits with cryotherapy. Absolutely. In fact, I was just thinking about it the other day because I haven't done the sauna in so long, as I mentioned. And I was like, I should go back there and do some cryotherapy, especially with summer coming around. That would be a great thing to add into my toolbox. Anyways, guys, I hope this helped. It's 8 o'clock. I have to get going here. Again, just a reminder, if you just signed on or if you're just new to the group, go back and watch all the old live Q&As. You'll get a lot of information from there, and watch them in chronological order because I really build up from the very first one to where we are today. And I will post another image on Friday for questions, for Q&A. Post your questions underneath there so they're all in one spot, and I make sure to get to your questions, and then I will try to get to as many questions as I can. And wish you guys well. Happy healing on your journey. Have an amazing, amazing week. Enjoy the beautiful weather in the spring if you have spring in your area. Be outside, be in nature, and help your body heal. And I will talk to you later. Have a good night.